was listening to one of my favorite podcasts the other day while I was running, and it's a running podcast specifically that features excellent PhD, credible sources and interviews. They almost always give amazing information. A couple of times, though, they step out of their research expertise and say some things that don't quite make sense. One of those was on athletes and FODMAP. The recommendation was to just avoid fructose and lactose altogether. It's the easiest because they're the most common to avoid any type of GI upset that we get when we eat FODMAPs or sugars that we don't absorb. But that means you eliminate entire food groups like fruit, dairy. Whether you believe in dairy or not, if you are a dairy eater, eliminating that entire food group is not a good thing. So eliminating entire food groups is never a nutritionally sound alternative or intervention unless you absolutely have to, based on some types of severe allergies. So what would I do? Well, I suffer from FODMAP. I have this issue where if I eat certain foods that have these FODMAP sugars, that my body does not absorb them very well, doesn't digest them, they're malabsorbed, and they end up getting fermented in my gut. And that means nasty stuff. Gassy, bloatedness, diarrhea, you name it. The TMI stuff that nobody wants to talk about unless you're an athlete and you deal with this kind of stuff. And then getting rid of it is something that you want to talk about. I work with my athletes and a lot of clients and patients trying to understand and diagnose these types of GI issues and work through them. Understand what's causing them. How do we eliminate them? And then how do we have a very well-rounded diet so we're still eating good and nutritionally sound? Eliminating food groups is never a good idea, and I want to start off with a story before I start to explain what FODMAP is. So individuals will eliminate dairy first. Example would be eating pizza. People will like, hey, I ate pizza and I got kind of bloaty and gassy and kind of gross. Well, people start off eliminating dairy right away. Got to be that evil, yucky dairy. And I think that's bullshit. Not the case at all. I love dairy, and I think if you're not allergic to it, it's fantastic. But even if you don't, and you're a vegan or a vegetarian, or you just don't believe in milk, fine. This story still works because this person eliminated dairy. No more cheese. Continues to eat, but still didn't resolve GI symptoms. Got to be the gluten in the crust. Okay, so now they've eliminated gluten. But they didn't add dairy back, so now dairy is gone and gluten is gone. And they continue to eat, but they still don't see complete recovery or an absence of these symptoms. They still get a little gassy, still get a little bloated, things are kind of gross. Like, what is it? Well, it's got to be a little bit of gluten in their food, right? They haven't gotten rid of it completely. There must have been dairy somewhere, and I didn't know. But more often than not, it wasn't dairy and it wasn't gluten. It was things like the mushrooms on that pizza, or the garlic, or the onions, or some of the vegetables, or maybe even a piece of fruit they had before. That's right. There's lots of fruits and vegetables that cause FODMAP issues. Now, I'm not saying fruits and vegetables are bad. You've got FODMAP. Some of them can be not so good or great for your GI system. Now, an individual has completely gotten rid of all this dairy and all this gluten and didn't identify the real problems. Well, how do we identify those problems? Let me introduce you to an app. This is my phone. I'm going to go back. This is my phone app, and you can look at the bottom right and see the FODMAP, the blue icon with the little squiggly black guts. This app is not free. I do not get paid any money by Monash University for recommending this app at all. It's something that I use for myself personally to help me manage my FODMAP issues, and it's something that I have almost all of my patients, athletes, clients who have GI issues buy so we can work through. I'll link the app link in the show notes so that you can grab it if you want to. Apple Store, Android Store, you buy it from them, whatever it is. This is just an honest recommendation for a tool that I think is incredibly valuable. In the past, we were stuck with sheets of paper and you had to sift through those to find out what was a FODMAP, what wasn't, and that was a giant pain in the ass. This app is pretty amazing because it works on a red light, green light system. And well, let's just get right into it. So I'm going to go to the food guide. So let's take a look at vegetables first. I'm going to scroll through the vegetables. Let's just start with The red light, green light system. Red light's got high FODMAP, probably going to cause a bit of an issue with your gut. Maybe if you are personally sensitive to one of those 6 sugars. What 6 sugars am I talking about? These 6 sugars. The fructose, the lactose, the fructans, the mannitols, the oligosaccharides, the GOSs, and the sorbitols. Those are all natural sugars that are occurring in these fruits and vegetables. This isn't added, this isn't processed. These are natural. And each one of these fruits and vegetables has a different content or amount of these 6 sugars. Sometimes, as you can see, there's 2 of them. Sometimes there's just 1 in differing amounts. So asparagus, 5 spears. Well, let me go back. Asparagus, 5 spears was the portion that had high fructose, high fructan. Now, fructans are chains of fructose, so they sit in the same family. Eat that, you digest it, you have FODMAP or you're fructose sensitive, you're going to get a little GI issue. Let's look some more through this to find out some of these other fruits and vegetables. Beets, for sure. Broccoli, broccolini, Brussels sprouts, butternut squash, cauliflower, celery. Let's scroll down, show you the corn. Oh, mushrooms. Mushrooms make me sad, right? Oh, onions. Haven't gotten to mushrooms yet. I jumped ahead. Leeks, shallot, green onion. Here's your mushrooms. All of them. Not that mushrooms are bad for you. It's that if you are mannitol sensitive to that particular FODMAP, it might cause an issue. Let's try shiitakes. Mannitol. Let's try portobello. Mannitol. So maybe that pizza wasn't the dairy, or it wasn't the gluten in the crust. Maybe it was the mushrooms, or maybe another vegetable that had fructose, fructans, sorbitols. Keep going. Onions. Talked about the onion family. Those are a big one. Peas. This one makes me sad too. I love peas. Green peas, snow peas. You get an Asian stir fry. They got mushrooms and peas. I can't eat it. It's kind of miserable. Lots of green though. So I did focus on the things you couldn't have, but there's a lot of green, things that you can have. And we'll talk about how to utilize that to your advantage when we're working through FODMAP. So we covered some of the vegetables. Let's go through some of the fruits. Because obviously the reason why I did this video was one of the recommendations was to avoid fructose and lactose. Well, I just showed you a bunch of red vegetables. Didn't have anything to do with fructose or lactose. And they're very common. Apples, high fructose. High sorbitol. Apricots, sorbitol and fructans. So all of the stone fruits, peaches, apricots, plums, really ripe bananas, cherries, dried cranberries, most dried fruits in general, raisins. So dried fruits, raisins, and dates are on this list. Dates, what do dates have? I got high fructans. Think about all the Lara bars or those date-based bars we buy. I'm like, hey man, it must have been my Gatorade, or I ate something that wasn't good, or I drank something that didn't match. Probably the raisins you were eating or the dried cranberries that some nutritionist told you were good to take on a run. Well, they are if you're not FODMAP sensitive to that particular sugar. Go here. Guavas, lychees, melons, mangoes, peaches, pears, right? Watermelon, raisins, raspberries, blueberries. Right? What's watermelon got? Fructose, mannitols, and fructans. Right? Okay, so what the hell do you eat, right? I just showed you a bunch of foods that, like, I'm really supposed to eat these, right? They're healthy. They're fruits and vegetables, and eating more produce is really kind of the goal for a healthy lifestyle. And it still is. But some of them you got to be careful with who you are. So let me show you something here. This image. So understanding FODMAP is really important. You need to understand how it works. So I showed you a bunch of fruits, a bunch of vegetables, and the 6 sugars that they can contain. Now you may or may not be sensitive to all those sugars, or maybe just 1 or 2 of those sugars. So for example, you can eat a whole apple, but I personally can only eat half an apple before it makes me FODMAP-y, distressed, gross. And your neighbor or your running partner, they may only be able to eat a quarter of an apple because they're FODMAP, fructan, or fructose sensitive. And then some people, they can't eat any apples because they're really fructose. So each individual is different. And to compound this being a little bit more frustrating is that it's dose dependent among other food groups. So while a whole apple, a half apple, a quarter apple might bother somebody, well, what about other foods that have the same sugars that if you eat them together, then create more than you could tolerate? Asparagus is a really good example. Asparagus and peaches. If you eat 5 spears or 10 spears of asparagus and you had a peach with lunch or dinner, that fructose load might overwhelm your gut and now you're all gassy, bloated. But what if you only eat half the asparagus and you have a peach and you have no problems? You're like pulling your hair out going, what is it? What food was it? And I can see and understand, because I live it, how frustrating this can be. That's where this phone app has really made it super simple to help diagnostically understand what you're sensitive to. As an athlete, it's a big deal. Whether you're eating on a daily diet and you get gassy and bloatedness, or whether you're taking certain foods on long runs or rides that are really just kind of blowing you up, causing GI distress because you shouldn't have eaten those. The Larabar but they're date-based, or the cranberries, or the banana, or the sweet potato, that are all good foods to take, but not if you're FODMAP sensitive, not if you're continually loading them on top of one another, and not if you're doing it for hour after hour. You can see where we could get into trouble. What the hell do we do? All right, check this out. One of the things that I would absolutely have you understand is the learning phase. It's that diagnostic approach. Buy the app, create a grocery list, buy green stuff, and eat those green foods for 10 to 14 days. If you see a real noticeable difference, there's a good chance you're FODMAP sensitive to one of those 6. Now it's time to start working with somebody to understand how to add those back in. Because here's the key, and this is the really important next step, is adding those foods back. Elimination diets are oftentimes, or more often than not, diagnostic diets. They're not meant for you to live on. They're meant for you to identify a problem and correct it. Same thing with FODMAP. Those foods that you took out, those red ones, you need to go back and find the ones like, oh God, I really got to have apples. I love them. Okay, how much can you tolerate? Are you a half an apple kind of guy, a quarter an apple kind of guy? Or maybe the fructose didn't bother you at all. Maybe it was sorbitols or mannitols and you just can't eat mushrooms, or right? You choose through that diagnostic process. Then here's the next thing, is that this is a lifetime. FODMAP is a lifetime situation. There's no pill for it, no procedure. Your body just doesn't absorb and digest these sugars well. So you need to learn what foods you can eat. And those are the foundational foods, like all those green foods. Build a big, healthy, colorful diet out of those foundational foods. And then start adding in the ones you want or need to have. And then understanding how much of those can you have so that you can decide if it's worth it. Like if you're gonna go out and get pho and it's gonna have green onion and white onion all in the broth, is it worth it? At least you can say yes and make the decision to feel shitty, literally that day, or not. But it's better than going around frustrated, not understanding what the hell it is that's causing these problems, and most specifically, not eating these foods that are supposed to be quote unquote healthy during your training that are just blowing you up, causing you not to be able to finish because you've got bad gas and bad bloating, and then that's not a good thing. What I hope I got through in this message, or what I wanted you to know, is that there is a better way than just eliminating foods. So we don't want to just stop drinking milk or stop eating yogurt or eliminate lactose or fructose. For this FODMAP, there is a better way. Get started. When you have issues, this is what dietitians do. Find a dietitian who has FODMAP and who's an athlete. It doesn't have to be me. There's lots of them. It can really help you speed up this learning curve so that it's not as frustrating as it used to be. All right, keep training good. You got questions, let me know. And as always, if you like what I do, please subscribe on YouTube, friend me up on Facebook, and find me on Instagram. Love to see what you're doing. Thanks. Bye-bye.